Adobe InDesign is a product that you use for desktop publishing. When we talk about desktop publishing, we're referring to things like magazines, newspapers, newsletters, any type of writing. Books may be published on them. If you ever sign up for a high school yearbook class, most schools use InDesign to create their yearbook spreads as well. When you open Adobe InDesign, first off, you'll have to go to Finder and Applications, just like all the other programs. And Adobe InDesign starts off like this. Remember, we have a welcome screen here. If you accidentally or purposefully close the welcome screen and it doesn't pop back up, you can always find it here under the Help menu, Welcome Screen, and it'll come back in. Okay? And here you have the ability to create new documents. Once you have stuff that you've created already, this gives you a list of the most recently created items. And I'm going to start by showing you the layout by creating a new document. Here you have all of the options as far as setting it up. We have some presets here, which at the moment there's none loaded, so we just use default. Here we talk about the number of pages, and depending on what you're creating, you'll determine the number of pages. When we talk about facing pages, this is what is called a spread, and you'll remember that term spread from that last video. And basically it's a set of two pages, a left page and a right page, and they're viewed together on the screen. And that's what this facing pages would be. Here we have page size, and you have some different sizes here: letter, legal, tabloid. You can do smaller sizes. There's some preset sizes for stationery, and of course you can put in custom sizes as well. Here for the custom sizes, or how to adjust, you'll notice that you have P's here. And when we do desktop publishing, our sizes are determined by pica, and that is spelled P-I-C-A, and points, just like it's like you point at something. So here we have 51 pica, 0 point. Now I just want you to notice that if I click up and we see points applying, when does it get to be 52 picas? And it's when you hit 12. So you know that there are 12 points in a pica. Okay? Here is your orientation. You have portrait and landscape. Remember, portrait is if you're looking at a piece of paper to where it's taller rather than wider. Landscape is just the opposite. It's wider rather than taller. You can set it up to have columns. Okay, and I'm going to just go ahead and set this up for 2 columns. And if you think about it, in magazines and newspapers, typically articles are set up to where you have multiple columns on a page. The gutter is the space between the columns of text. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set that at 2 pica. That's 2p. And then here we have margins, where we have 3 pica, and it's 3 pica all the way around right now. And notice this little link. If I unlink it, this would allow me to change one margin at a time. Okay, so let's say I wanted a top margin that was actually 4 pica and everything else 3 pica. Okay, and I'm not saying that that's a magic number. I'm just saying we could do that. And by doing that, by unlinking it or unlocking it, it allows us to change each one individually. I'm going to go ahead and click More Options, and down here you have the ability to set your bleed and slug. I want you to notice that the bleed and the slug both have that same link or lock. That means that when you put in a number for one of these, top, bottom, inside, or outside, it's going to apply it to all of them. If you unlink it, it allows you to do it for just a certain one. Remember that your bleed is when you want some printing to extend beyond the specified page size so that there's no white space when the magazine or when the article is actually trimmed, when the page is trimmed. So I'm going to go ahead and put 3 pica, whoops, maybe I didn't select that, a 3 pica all the way around. Now, the slug extends beyond the bleed. And the slug is simply a guide that you put for an area outside the bleed area where you might want to type information about the document and it doesn't actually get printed. So if you're working on something with a partner, you could kind of leave notes outside of that, and it gets taken care of separately. Okay, I'm going to just leave this. Well, actually, I want to go ahead and put the slug in there so that you can see it when I click OK here. Now, let's say that you maybe work for a magazine, or maybe you're creating yearbook spreads, and you know that this is the size, margins, and bleed and slug and columns that you want on every page. Then you could go ahead and save this as a preset, and it would show up here. Okay, I'm not going to save this as a preset right now, but I'm just going to click OK. And here we have a one-page spread. So let me explain what these lines are. The blue line out here, this is the slug. Okay, remember that's the area outside the bleed area where information about the document can be printed. The red area is the bleed area. Okay, and that's where if you look here, this black line is your document border. So basically anything that you want printed needs to be inside this black line. However, you also should know that if you want something to extend all the way to the document border, then you probably want to extend it past it into the bleed area. You have your margin guides, which are these kind of purpley lines here. And the margin guides, because when pages are trimmed, sometimes there's mistakes, and they may be trimmed too short, or too big, or whatever. And so you typically, at least with text, leave yourself a margin guide, and you know that you don't want to put text outside of the margin. And here inside our margins, of course, we have our 2 columns right here and here. And then there is a gutter in between. And this gutter here in between allows you to have text, 2 columns of text next to each other, and it gives it enough space where you can tell what when one sentence ends or when one line ends, and you go down, read down here instead of trying to read all the way across. We have all of our tools, just as we have with all the other Adobe programs. We have our selection tool. We have our direct selection tool. If you hold it down, it also has a position tool. We have our pen tool and the other tools that accompany the pen tool. We have our text and type tool rather. When anytime you want to put in text, you also have the ability to type on a path. Oops. You have pencil tool, which also has a smooth and eraser docked with it. The line tool. And here, notice that you have a rectangle that has an X through it. That X means that it's a frame. Okay, and typically we use frames when we want to place images. So you'll notice that you have 3 shapes for frames: rectangle, ellipse, and polygon. And don't get this frame confused with just the plain old rectangle tool, because sometimes you do need to put shapes into your spread, and this is how you would put in a shape. Okay, this is not where you would want to put in an image though. This is what that's for, to put it in a frame. Here we have the rotate tool. Below that, scale tool. Docked with scale is also shear. You have cut, or your scissors tool. You have free transform. You have your gradient swatch tool. You have your gradient feather tool. Below this is your note tool, your eyedropper tool, which allows you to sample colors. It also has the measure tool. Your hand tool basically just allows you to move your document. Obviously, your zoom tool. Now, this down here is important because I want you to notice that you have two color boxes. The solid square, that is your fill color. The outline is your stroke color. Whichever one is in front or in the foreground is the one that you are currently using or selecting. So you can see that the fill is in front, and here is the color. It's transparent. Okay? Here is the fill, and we know that it's black. Okay? Underneath that, we have the ability to put in the default fill and stroke, which is exactly as you see there. Below that, notice this two little dots here. This is kind of small. The one on the left, if you click on it, whatever these colors are, it's affecting the container. If you click on the right, it's actually affecting the text. Okay? And I want you to notice that when I click on that T, look at what happens. The T here shows up, which is allowing us to change the color of the text. Okay, so you see how that is. Now if I go back to the container, now that's different. Here are our options up here, and depending on what tool you have selected, your options change. We have panels over on the right hand side. Pages shows you what page you're on. You have color panel, you have swatches, and other panels that we'll use. And when it comes time to use them, they're all here under the window menu, just as they have been in all of the other programs. If you lose some panels, you can either find your specific panel, or you could go here and you could do Reset Essentials Workspace, and it's going to give you all of the basic panels that you may have closed. Now, when it comes time for you to actually follow along with my directions, you're going to need to resize this screen here like you did in Dreamweaver by dragging the lower right corner. Resize it so that you can see your document, and then you'll need to get your video next to it so that you can see that and work along with it as well.